colleague, Marian Duris. He is an advisor for MEP in the European Parliament. Really good to have you here on the program, sir. Looking at it from a European perspective, European countries, of course, are some of the major donors when it comes to both military and financial aid for Ukraine. How big of an issue is this now for the newly elected European Parliament that's now sort of in office and is now looking at another 5 years of governance across Europe, trying to sort out the multitude of security challenges on Europe's doorsteps?
Thank you very much for the invitation. When you mentioned the European Parliament, that's the last election. So we see a move of this personnel to more to the left, to the right, and emptying of the center area. So it means, but from the perspective of transatlantic ties or pro-Russian, pro-American leaning, there is not a huge change. What about elected MEPs, new elected MEPs? And yes, there are many voices which are rising. What about doubts about supporting the Ukraine by weapons? But on the other side, many decisions. What about from European perspective are done by qualified majority? So European Union, which will be led again by probably by Ursula von der Leyen, maybe High Commissioner for Foreign Policy and Foreign Affairs will be Kaja Kallas, and maybe there will be some official from Portugal. I think it will be Antonio Costa. So direction will be quite the same, and maybe just a bit shades will be changed. Not some important decisions.
At the same time, though, Marian, you now have a Hungarian presidency for the next 6 months in the EU. We just saw Viktor Orbán first going to Kiev to meet with President Zelensky, and then he headed to Moscow and met with Putin. And of course, that was a trip that was not authorized across Europe. In fact, multitude of European leaders afterwards said, well, you know what? He's not negotiating on behalf of the EU. How big of a crack are you seeing in the unity when it comes to the EU when you have a presidency such as the Hungarian one going, according to some, a bit rogue and heading to Moscow for talks with Putin?
Exactly, like you say, it was an unauthorized trip or way to Moscow and other capitals. Yes, we could see it as a kind of individual way of Mr. Orbán, as his sovereign decision to move to the Moscow, move to the Kiev, and talk with their leaders. Yes, Hungary now has presidency over the EU, but this trip or diplomatic talks with the Russian and the Ukrainian and Chinese side as well can be signal to the creation of new faction in European Parliament. Of faction Patriots for Europe. And yes, Viktor Orbán was initiator of this new faction, which is quite conservative right-leaning and patriotic leaning. And yes, it was signal what will be politics, how he see the politics, and how EU should be governed. If he would have enough influence.
Marian Duris, an advisor.
Directions, it's the question.
Right. Marian Duris, an advisor for MEP in the European Parliament. Thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World.